to the Economic Development Committee meeting. We're here in room 1010. I'm joined by my colleagues, Marquise Harris-Dawson and Senator Gil Cedillo. Okay, we have no speaker cards. But we will call this meeting to order. Okay, no comments, no comment cards at this time? Great. Members, unless you have an objection, I'm suggesting that we take item 2, 9, 10, and 11.
So moved.
On consent. That shall be the order. And we've got a request to continue item 12 to June 27, 2017.
So moved.
That will be the order. So we have first up item 1.
Item number 1, Joint Workforce Development Board, Economic and Workforce Development Department and City Administrative Officer reports, and CLA to report relative to the City of Los Angeles Year 18 Workforce Development Board Annual Plan for Program Year June 30th, 2017 through June 30th, 2018 to provide employment services to businesses and job seekers.
Okay.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Shafia Mir from the CAO's office, and I have the department here with me.
And Felipe Chavez with the CLA's office.
You may proceed.
So before you is a report from the CAO's office regarding the city's Year 18 Workforce Development Board Annual Plan based on the submittal from EWDD to be effective, the annual plan to be effective from July 2017 through June 2018. I'll give you a brief overview with some highlights and changes, and then we can take your questions after that. The Year 18 annual plan is comprised of approximately $67.8 million to fund the Economic and Workforce Development Department's workforce development strategies and activities. The funding sources consist primarily of the Federal Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, or WIOA, formula and competitive grants, Los Angeles County grants, various special funds and competitive grants, and the City General Fund. The Los Angeles Workforce Development Board, or WDB, approved the Year 18 annual plan on May 24th, 2017, following the required 30-day public comment period. The annual plan presents EWDD's planned expenditure of federal, state, and local workforce development grant funds, as well as city funds, for the coming 2017-18 program year. EWDD manages the city's workforce development system with joint oversight by the WDB, council, and mayor per the what we call the WIBLIO, or the Workforce Development Board Local Elected Leaders Agreement. The workforce development system consists of a network of service providers, which includes 16 WorkSource centers providing services for adults and 14 YouthSource centers providing services for youth from the ages of 14 through 24. The Year 18 annual plan pursues efforts to align goals and objectives identified in regional and local workforce strategic plans. Highlights include, but are not limited to, continued focus on previously established priorities, including but not limited to service requirements for individuals with disabilities, individuals experiencing homelessness, veterans, and individuals undergoing reentry after incarceration, and through the integrated service delivery model. The annual plan includes a draft of the WIOA Local Workforce Plan 2017-2020 for council approval, subject to final approval by the Los Angeles Workforce Development Board. And that's, the local workforce plan is basically a set of strategies. It doesn't have a direct budget impact, but it's the strategic plan. The annual plan includes general funded programs approved in the adopted 17-18 city budget, including $2.3 million for the Summer Youth Employment Program, $4.5 million for the Gang Injunction Curfew Settlement, and $2 million for LA Rise services for homeless individuals, and funding for the which is LA Rise, and also general fund in the amount of $1.7 million for the day laborer, Cash for College, Higher LA, and YouthSource Center programs at Boyle Heights and Watts. New funding sources include funding from Measure H for a further expansion of LA Rise for homeless services, and per EWDD's annual plan, they're anticipating about $1 million from Measure H for that. EWDD does intend to report back to the Workforce Development Board as well as Council and Mayor regarding any changes to the annual plan, including revisions to grant amounts and additional grants that will be received. So that concludes the CAO's overview, and we can take any questions that you may have, or the CLA may want to.
In addition to the budget aspect of the Workforce Development Board annual plan, our office prepared a report on the policies that are included in the plan. And our report includes 5 of the 7 policies that were actually in the plan. And I want to make a clarification and request a technical amendment to add 2 additional policies, which I'll read at the end of my discussion here. One of those policies is the definition of quality jobs, and this policy defines what constitutes a quality job and aims to ensure that the distribution of the WIOA resources is directed and informed on the basis of job quality.
So how are we defining quality jobs then?
So we're actually looking at 2 things. One is wages. We want to make sure that any employer that we're working on is paying a living wage. And then second is looking at their overall policies for sick leave, for employee benefits, and any other type of employee enhancement. So we did establish a criteria that we're still working on, but that's the essence.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Mr. Chair, that's a priority of the board. It actually came from the board chair, making sure that we don't focus on minimum wage jobs, although we know that's important. We're also considering jobs that have a career ladder. So you may start at minimum wage, but we're hoping that our interventions can bring you up to a healthy living wage job other than a minimum wage job.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
The second policy is the Non-Discrimination and Equal Opportunity Policy. And this policy establishes the city's policy on the non-discrimination and equal opportunity procedures for the WIOA-assisted programs or activities. The policy also ensures that all WIOA Title I contractors are in compliance with all provisions of the federal, state, and city of Los Angeles equal opportunity and non-discrimination regulations. Number 3 is property, equipment, purchasing, inventory, and disposition policy. And this policy provides guidance and establishes the procedures for purchasing inventory and disposal of property and equipment using WIOA funds. Number 4 is the Workforce Development Board notification policy. Under this policy, the EWDD is to be notified upon finding or being notified of any question or disallowed costs, financial stability concerns, or any official government investigations involving a service provider funded by WIOA funds. Number 5 is youth consumer flow, and this policy describes the sequence of activity for a youth accessing WIOA-funded services through the Youth Source Center system. And then there's a list of requirements that each service provider must provide. The 2 additional policies that I'm requesting that we add are the contract execution policy, and this policy provides guidelines for the timely execution of workforce development system contracts and the youth workforce learning expenditure requirement. This last policy provides the guidance and establishes the procedures regarding the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, youth program, work experience programs, and minimum expenditure requirements.
Great.
Mr. Chair, Greg Irish, the Executive Director of Workforce Development Board. This is the new plan. A couple of hundred pages. I'm hoping you don't have to peruse it. But this is the first time we're actually at pre-recession levels in terms of unemployment. 4.3%. There's 90,000 people still unemployed in the city of LA, but prior to the recession, the unemployment rate was 5.6%. Some economists have opined that we're at full employment. We know that what has happened with the economic recovery hasn't lifted all boats. There are still folks left behind. This plan attempts to address that. What we're focusing on, and this is at the instruction of the mayor as well, are those who've been left out of the economic recovery. Homeless individuals, formerly incarcerated individuals, disconnected youth, single mothers, low-income individuals, English language learners, persons with disabilities, persons without suitable levels of education, veterans, LGBT individuals, and of course African Americans who are at the lowest rung of the ladder in terms of employment. That's where our investments will be in this plan. We're talking about a $67.8 million plan. We will have specific contract requirements for each of our service providers to address those groups, and I'll mention some of them. We're committed, other than the special funding that we've set aside for incarcerated individuals, but through the 16 Workstar centers alone, the standard contracts, we're going to serve 3,000 ex-offenders. And again, we still have special programming to serve formerly incarcerated individuals. We have special funding to service some of the other populations, specific goals and objectives for homeless individuals, and special programming that we've received from the county, as well as goals for persons with disabilities, et cetera. We'll be able to report back to you periodically, hopefully by mid-year. Remember, our year goes from July 1st through June 30th, with how we are achieving those goals so that you can see the performance parameters. We also have before you, we're going to be recommending 14 youth service centers strategically placed throughout the city. We did have to close some centers, but what we did was we did an analysis to make sure that there were no workforce development deserts within the city of LA. So before you again, we've got multiple strategies to deal with those populations. Regardless of 90,000 people out of work, we realize that our charge is to deal with that 90,000, 90-plus thousand, and deal with those who have not benefited from the recovery. I need to qualify everything I'm saying, though, because the Trump administration has proposed anywhere from a 21 to a 40% cut. We don't believe, in as much as we're still cut in the funding that we're going to receive, the federal funding, which is the backbone of EWDD. We don't anticipate that will impact us this year. That's wishful thinking, because we're still split-year funded, so we're under the previous president's budget. But as of October 1st, that may impact us sometime later. Definitely, it will impact us next year. We don't know what the percentage will be because that's a proposal and that hasn't been enacted by Congress. And I'll defer to the general manager of EWDD.
Assistant General Manager.
I'm sorry.
Robert
I didn't mean to
Sines.
promote you, but
And first of all, I just want to thank the CLA and CAO for their work with us over the year and in putting together this plan. As you can see, it's a very complicated document with a lot of information. So I just want to thank both of them for their assistance. And then with the committee, because as a city, I don't think there's been a city that's been as committed to the disenfranchised, if we want to use that term, or vulnerable populations as ours. There's multiple strategies, multiple policies, specifically around the homeless and reentry, that Workforce is a part of. Workforce is not the sole solution, but we need to be a part of those discussions. We've worked hard to be a part of those discussions and bring our expertise of helping folks transition into the private sector market. What I did bring is another gift here, which is a report just right off of the press that was finalized yesterday by LA EDC, that the city and the county workforce development commissions, and the author here, Samjita, is back here, is going to present to the committee in July all of the information here. That's the leading piece of information on where the jobs are at within our region. And we've taken a regional approach to our work, and being able to understand folks, we need to put folks where the jobs are at, but we also have to prepare folks for the type of work that is coming. And in this changing economy, the old warehouse job, labor job is disappearing, and it's disappearing quick. And they're not coming back. So we have to have an educated workforce in the city of Los Angeles. And one prominent finding in this report is that 1 out of every 4 adult working age individual in the city does not have a high school degree. And without a high school degree for any entry-level jobs, including many...
Has that number gone up over the years, or is it pretty steady, or is it...
It's held steady. It's held steady. The good news is with our work on the disconnected youth piece and our work around the 1 out of 5 issue, it has gone down for that 16 to 24 population, but it's held steady, unfortunately, in that 25 plus. But that is one of the major policy areas. So we work in partnership with the state EDD, but more importantly with the LA community colleges and LAUSD's adult ed, among others. So we're very proud to be a part of a system of work that is trying to impact these large segments of populations that have not traditionally enjoyed the economic success of our recovery. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you for the report. I really appreciate the collaborative effort with EWDD, CLA, CAO, CLA, and the departments as we've tried to come up with a plan that does address the concerns as it impacts those most vulnerable. And so we appreciate the focus on homelessness and reentry. The source of funds, the $67 million, is that, how does that compare to years past?
We're actually showing an increase of about $1 million from last year, 1.4% increase in dollars. And that's predominantly because of additional resources that have come both from the Rodriguez settlement case and Measure H that we've been able to, and other grants that have been coming in.
On this issue of youth and jobs, I see we've got two areas: the summer youth program, and then there's funding, of course, from the general fund.
Right.
Have we seen an increase in those programs, in those dollar amounts, or?
Yes. So your council approved, and the mayor recommended, and your council approved an increase from $2 million to $2.3 million on the city general fund, which allowed us to continue to pay the increase in the minimum wage. And then we are very optimistic in our work with LA County that we're going to be able to realize an increase in the funds from LA County. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, on the federal side, as Greg pointed out, there has been no increases on federal dollars, and specifically, there's $0 for summer youth employment on the federal side.
Okay, we've been joined by our colleague Mitch O'Farrell. But gentlemen, are there any comments or questions this time?
I'm impressed with the plan, but I want to raise this, as I have in other committees. The Trump administration is going to be, it's brutal. People get caught up in all the big drama, but the fact of the matter is, this is where the pain is going to happen with these cutbacks. Yeah. We see them in housing. We see them here. We need to think about strategies to backfill. We need to think about the state of California, the incredible resources that the state has, other sources of revenue. We have to figure out, as from both tax policy to other sources of revenue to our relationships with the state, how we backfill and weather the Trump era, because we're getting slashed, and I would not even anticipate a best case scenario. If they say 20 to 40, I'd budget around 40 to 50 in terms of the cuts, and we've got to figure out what we do. What's the impact? I mean, how do we project the impact of this incredible plan, but it doesn't have the revenue to execute it? So that's my principal concern.
Yes, Council Member, we're looking to your direction, and I think you've given us, you and the chair and the members of this committee. For instance, within the plan, we're talking about maximizing our own resources. We have to look to the harbor, to the airport, to DWP. Those are job generators. You've already endeavored to raise the minimum wage. You've also talked about backfilling for city employees, the aging workforce, and believe me, I'm one of them, in terms of making sure that locals are hired. So we are going to be developing a strategy to maximize the use of the city's resources, procurement, its departments, et cetera, that are job generators within this region. And I mentioned three of them. Again, the airport, the harbor, and DWP account for thousands and thousands of jobs, even those that are within the supply chain that we think we can maximize. Of course, our preference is to have the money from the feds as well as that, but we will develop that strategy. We're taking direction from you and some of the things that you guys have done in terms of trying to address that and maximizing and leveraging resources.
Comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and what a great report. Thank you so much. I couldn't agree more with Mr. Cedillo. I think it's open season on Los Angeles, and it's open season on all the blue states, quite frankly, with this person we have occupying the White House. So we've got to be prepared and be on the offense. Just a couple of questions for clarification and some thoughts. And in terms of the youth source centers and the work source centers, the distribution of the funding, I'm sure that information is within the report. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yes.
Yeah.
So the Workstar Center allocation, this year we're going to have 16 Workstar centers.
Up from 14?
No, it's actually down from 17. This is on the adult side.
The adult centers.
Right, and we had a consolidation. We did actually open up one additional satellite site as well in Mr. Dawson's area. So we have 16 sites, and we would actually have 3 satellite sites, 2 in CD8 and Central Library. The funding for the 16 comprehensive is a little bit over $1 million, $1,038,000 per center. And we know that that is just the base funding. We ask as part of the RFQ that each of our providers provide at a minimum of 20% leverage dollars. Almost all of them hit that minimum of 20%, and there's some of our providers that actually double, triple that. So our investment actually is doubled or tripled right off the bat in many of the communities. For those centers that haven't had the same type of leverage response, we work with them on specific grants to try to bring their resources up. On the Youth Source Center side, we will be coming to you at your next meeting with the results of the RFP. So this approves everything except the Youth Source Center funding and those final recommendations. We actually are doing something a little bit different this year. We have a mix of funding that we're putting out. So it went up from about $800,000 WIOA dollars to about $1 million. But in that $1 million, $750 is WIOA, $250 is our summer youth employment dollars. So we're looking at base funding about $1 million for our Youth Source Center as well. The WIOA legislation changed the youth piece somewhat dramatically. That now they require 75% to work with disconnected youth. We were the first large system in the country to actually do that, and we did it prior to the national legislation. So we're going to be in very stable ground in meeting that compliance side. And it also requires us to work in partnership with the school district, community college, and a whole host of other agencies. Mm-hmm. And we have an initiative called P3, Performance Partnership Pilot, which we're rolling out citywide, which is looking very specific to probation, foster youth, runaway youth, and homeless youth.
Perfect, because I know that one of the things we've got going in the East Hollywood area is partnerships with YPI.
Exactly.
And they have a program specifically to make sure that homeless youth get their GEDs or graduate. You mentioned 1 out of 5. That's
yes.
you.
Yes.
So kudos, congratulations. That's phenomenal. It's really investing in people right when they need it the most.
Right.
You're literally saving lives and providing an opportunity. So that's wonderful. And then lastly, a focus on an entertainment industry jobs pipeline. If you all could talk a little bit about that. I mean,
sure.
Jobs are coming back as never before because of AB 1839, and we need to look for ways to keep those jobs coming. It's a great opportunity.
And that's one of the hardest nuts to crack. Mm-hmm. The entertainment industry, and the mayor, as you remember, last year hosted a major effort at his house and brought together entertainment officials to expand the summer youth employment. So we did draw some success from that. But much of the major studios have their internship process that is fairly closed and is very hard for our young people to compete directly with them. However, what we found success is working in the entertainment fields that are community production. So Shakespeare LA is one of our classic examples that actually introduces young people to not just to acting part, but all of the production side of the world. And it's in the community. They have access to these positions. We subsidize those summer youth employment. And from there, we're working to try to place them into that next position and that exposure. But it is one of the toughest nuts to crack.
Sure.
Councilmember, we've got to get away from classifying industries because it's becoming more and more difficult to do so. Let me go over the sectors that we are focusing on. Logistics, transportation, goods movement, and trade, one sector. Healthcare, leisure, hospitality, security, advanced manufacturing, financial services, biotech, biosciences, information tech, and construction. As you know, the entertainment industry has some elements of that in terms of information and technology, et cetera. So we think we'll probably capture most of those industries because actually there are sectors and then there's subsectors and there are groups of industries, and we'll probably be able to tackle that particular industry. In light of the fact that they received also tax credits for doing business, we'd expect that there would be some sort of benevolence or some sort of obligation, public obligation to hire. So we'll take that challenge, and I think there's a number of things. Again, information technology, we know what's happening with my kids are great at it, the video production industry all falls under information technology instead of entertainment, so it's becoming a little blurred in terms of sectors.
Sounds like a great strategy.
Right.
And just lastly, there are other inroads one can make. For example, a lot of jobs are coming to Hollywood right now, Netflix and you name it. The studios are growing and expanding, and they all belong to the Chamber of Commerce. They all come to board meetings, et cetera. Maybe you've already presented, maybe you've already started to build those relationships. If not, allow me to assist you.
Yeah, that would be great. So, we do work with the LA Chamber of Commerce and a number of local Chamber of Commerce around the city. But Hollywood, I don't think we've had a direct connect.
Let's get you there, because sometimes some of the studio heads are board members.
Right. We would appreciate that. This afternoon in General Assembly in Little Tokyo, we're actually hosting our first Infotech panel, and the mayor is leading that conversation with about 5 or 6 companies and presenting to a number of our young people. So Greg is absolutely right. Then when we talk about entertainment, sometimes we do classify it just as the classic entertainment and the big studios, but it really does cut across many different sectors.
Great. Thank you.
Good. Mr. Hurst-Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's a wonderful report and exciting outlook for what we can accomplish here in the city of Los Angeles. I do think the work you all have done sets us up to be a leader in not only vision but results. I had a very particular question that there's no reason why you'd be prepared to answer, so if you're not, it's fine to say that and we can come back to it later. But it seems to me that on a routine basis, this body puts out, this body meaning the City Council, makes what are called project labor agreements. And in those project labor agreements, they have local hire targets and goals and aspirations. And one of the things that causes intense consternation is the term I'll use in communities is residents see these public projects and doesn't look like anybody from their neighborhoods is working on them. I would point to the Crenshaw rail line, which runs right in front of a Workstar center, actually.
Yeah.
But, you know, every community meeting I'm in, people go, hey, councilman, why aren't our folks working on this line, right? So do you all use that as a one of your foci when you're developing your work plan, and if so, how do you interact with it, and is there anything that we can do to be helpful in making the link?
That is a goal. Actually, Robert is currently, we've met with Metro. We've convinced Metro that it can no longer just be concerned with moving people to and fro, that actually transit-oriented development's involved, and that's why I mentioned city departments and other external factors. Now transportation has to talk about transit-oriented development and what happens with their supply chain, what's going to happen near these stations, et cetera. So we all have to step out of our comfort zone and focus on workforce development. So we're in the process of trying to formulate a relationship, an official relationship with Metro, to talk about its WIN program. It's trying to implement a program called WIN that will have hiring requirements both for Metro itself and then for the communities that are impacted by the projects that we anticipate once the different lines are put into effect, as well as the economic development that will take place. Again, it's critical that we formulate these relationships with these departments. Again, the airport, thousands of jobs in the area. Actually, when you look at that area, there's 40,000 jobs connected in that area alone. We need to maximize that. That is in the plan to deal with Metro, to talk about what we can do to make sure that we maximize the hiring, both of construction and thereafter. We're talking about SC. We did have a relationship with SC in terms of what's happening with USC Village, but what takes place thereafter, we want to make sure we maximize the jobs that take place thereafter. And then we want to not overpromise. It's not just about the construction jobs, because actually when you look at how many people are new building your house or building a building, they're very few. We have to get a percentage of those jobs. But really the key is the supply line in terms of all the goods and services associated with the construction project, and thereafter what happens. And again, what we're focusing on is middle skills jobs. 3/4 of all jobs in the next decade in California will be middle skills jobs. Jobs that require more than a high school education, but less than a 4-year college degree. Got to focus on that. We actually have 31% of the money that we're actually allocating to these adult centers must be spent on training. 31%. Then there are other supportive services, et cetera. So we're focusing on training to qualify people for those jobs. 47% of job openings in California will be middle skills jobs as well. And I think I gave you some of the skills gaps. African Americans have the highest unemployment rate within this city. African Americans and Native Americans have the lowest labor force participation rates. Income equality is pervasive among Latinos and African Americans. They're also disproportionately represented among the working poor, and you tried to address that with the minimum wage increase. 24.5%, as Robert said, of adults 25 years of age or older in this city don't have a high school diploma, and 46% of the Hispanic population lacks a high school credential. This plan attempts to address that. It's not a panacea. We would assume that we'll be looking at some of the actions you take to see whether there are some other relationships, PLAs, et cetera. I was the one who negotiated the PLA that stole the Montreal Expos and put them in Washington, D.C. with the new stadium development. So we've got a lot of expertise in doing that. So we anticipate we'll be involved in that as well.
It is a very powerful tool, the PLA, both for the construction, but I always push to talk about the non-construction side, because that is where the longer-term jobs are, and also where it's more broad. Not everyone's suited for construction. The second piece is really monitoring. So John Reamer, he's a saint, and I think any of the resources about him or for his department to do the monitoring, because without that monitoring component to it and the regular reporting back to you all on that monitoring, it just doesn't happen. People are just not inclined to take a risk on folks that are not already in the workforce. But PLAs and the CBAs are extremely powerful tools. We think a lot about that. We support that, and we do try to push the supply chain. On a related note, I didn't mention the local target hiring policy that was out of this committee. Right now, there is 1,400 individuals, about 40% from South Los Angeles, that have already self-selected, have come through our Workstar centers, have applied to city jobs. There's 60 plus that have been hired, and there's about another 80 in the queue. But trying to realize that greater vision of getting thousands of folks hired in the public sector is what we're attempting to do. So on two pieces, we've actually, with the LAUSD bus drivers, we're actually using that pool as our target to do that matching. And we're going to do an event with LAX on their suppliers with that vulnerable targeted population through the targeted hiring process.
Okay, good. Well, we want to track closely with you on this. This is very important, really the core of what this committee is about, and we appreciate the focus on those who've been left behind, because if we're serious about raising the boats, there's got to be there too. So, again, we thank you for your comments. We're going to, members, we're going to approve the CAO's report as received and as amended. and approve the CLA report as amended. If there are no objections, that'll be the order. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, members, we have a plum meeting at 2 o'clock that some need to get to. I want to make sure that we're able to cover everything on the agenda. So let's take up item 8 next. Item 8.
Item number 8. Item 8, Bureau of Contract Administration report relative to the implementation of Los Angeles Fair Chance Initiative for Hiring, aka Ban the Box Ordinance. This matter has also been referred to the Entertainment and Facilities Committee.
Okay.
Good afternoon. I'm Kimberly Fitzpatrick with the Bureau of Contract Administration. Thank you very much for the opportunity to report to you on the Fair Chance Initiative for Hiring, or Ban the Box Ordinance. At the City Council's request, the Bureau of Contract Administration, with the assistance of the Economic Workforce Development Department, has prepared a written report describing employer input regarding implementation of the Ban the Box requirements. This report also provides estimated costs for various outreach options that could be used to further inform businesses and job seekers about the new program. The BCA and EWDD solicited feedback from over 1,000 contacts in the business community during December and January. These contacts included chambers of commerce, neighborhood councils, business improvement districts, and business source centers. 25 responses were received. The report breaks down the responses in greater detail, but in general, most of the responses were neutral questions or suggestions for implementation or policy amendments. In response to this feedback, the BCA has developed a variety of tools to assist employers in implementation. Our website now contains official posters, rules and regulations, sample forms and letters, and answers to frequently asked questions. We also drafted a step-by-step guideline for employers, as well as an individual assessment form, which can be used to walk employers through the process. These forms are included as attachments A and B in the report. The report also lays out some additional outreach strategies that were used successfully for the minimum wage implementation, but those would necessitate additional resources. The BCA will, of course, continue to solicit and evaluate feedback from the community as our implementation continues. Thank you very much, and I'm happy to address any questions.
We know how important this outreach effort is, and in fact, I heard the radio ad that was running yesterday, day before yesterday. It was very thorough, very complete.
Excellent.
Good job. And a good job. What resources do you need to continue to carry out this task?
We have, to date, we've been able to utilize some of the staff and the outreach resources that we have that we're using on the minimum wage program as well. That has worked to this point. For example, staff resources as well as some of the outreach resources we have that we've been able to utilize on our on-call consultants. For example, some of these consultants will go out and do door-to-door outreach, knocking on businesses' doors, letting them know about the requirements and the posters and where they can go for additional information. When we first started that back in July and August of last year, it was focused on minimum wage, but we've been able to integrate the Ban the Box materials and resources into those efforts as well, and we'll certainly continue to do that. Going forward, we will certainly continue to utilize the joint efforts wherever we can. As you all know, on July 1st, the minimum wage increase is upon us. It'll be affecting small businesses for the first time, and there will be an increase on the larger businesses as well. So we don't know exactly how that will impact workload, so it's a little bit hard to predict with certainty what resources we'll have. But we feel comfortable where we are now, and we'll certainly keep you posted.
Very good. Any other questions, members?
Quickly, Mr. Chair. Thank you. I know that in Entertainment Facilities Committee, we addressed this and heard the report and made comments and suggestions, and it's part of the record. One of the issues, LADWP, and with that's an opportunity for them to help with notification and outreach. How has that been in terms of the cooperation, the willingness for LADWP to assist?
That was a great suggestion, and they were very helpful with the minimum wage notice. That's in their current newsletter. It went out to all of their customers in English and Spanish, so we were able to include a notice about the minimum wage rollout. They have expressed cooperation, and we will certainly be working with them to try to do the same for the Ban the Box information.
Terrific. And you'll either let this committee know or Entertainment and Facilities Committee know if you run into any hiccups with that. It's a critical piece, I think, that will really help.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, members, no other questions. We will note and file. Thank you very much for the report. Okay, items 4, 5, 6, and 7.
Okay. Item 4 is adopted budget recommendation relative to instructing the Economic and Workforce Development Department to report in regard to the metrics used for economic development programs and jobs created through the adult and youth workforce development programs. Item number 5, another adopted budget recommendation relative to instructing the EWDD to report in regard to its ability to use the Assistant Chief Grants Administrator position in the citywide economic development team to leverage grants. Item number 6, adopted budget recommendation relative to instruct the EWDD to report in regard to the status of 10 properties that were transferred to the city when the Community Redevelopment Agency was eliminated. And item number 7, adopted budget recommendation relative to instruct the EWDD to report in regard to how many youth will be served in fiscal year 2017-18 through the Youth Employment Program funded in the general city purposes budget.
Okay, thank you. We've got 4 items, and we've got the GM, EWDD with us at the table. Madam GM, why don't
I'm
you...
here for 5 and 6.
Pardon?
I'm up here for 5
You're
and
for
6.
5 and 6? Okay, who's up here for 4 and 4? Who's up here for
Robert
4?
Science, on the workforce development side.
Okay.
So we have federal measures that we actually have to report on a quarterly basis to the state and to the feds. Then we have a number of local measures that we actually report to our Workforce Development Board. Among those measures is the number of folks that we enroll into our programs, but also more importantly is the number of folks that we've trained, number of folks that we were able to get high school diplomas or other credentials, the number of individuals that we place into employment, and the number of at the wage that we place them, and then how long they're retained within the that particular job. So those are the major numbers that we do report. And then we actually report on the demographics and the number of folks that are veterans, the number of folks that are homeless, and we go through that list as well. We use a system called CalJobs, which every one of our registered clients is actually entered into, and we have a fairly robust data system that is able to report that back out.
Okay. All right. Any questions?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, committee members. My name is Daisy Hernandez. I'm the new Chief Grants Administrator for the city.
Welcome.
Thank you. And I'm here for item number 4 on the economic development side.
Okay.
I understand you need information about the metrics that we use for our programs.
Correct.
Well, we actually keep track and monitor the numbers of businesses that are enrolled in our program, the businesses that receive training and counseling, technical assistance, businesses that are open, new businesses, startups, existing businesses that want to expand, maybe open a new a separate location, and we track the jobs created. And these are metrics that we have to provide for HUD, for the funding source, for services, and also, again, for job creation.
Okay.
And I'd welcome any questions.
All right. I think you've been very thorough. Probably no questions. That covers 4 and 5, 6 and 7. Madam EWDD?
Okay, ready for me?
Yes. Job well done. Thank you.
Yes. Okay, with respect to number 5, the question or the issue raised is the position of Assistant Chief Grants Administrator position and as part of the citywide economic development team to leverage grants. And I believe this issue was raised during the budget process, and I just wanted to correct the record. The Assistant Chief Grants Administrator position which is a civil service position, even though we have requested an exemption from the civil service classification back in August of 2016. We're still waiting for a response on that and been checking back diligently. This position is drawn and designed to form a business assistance unit that would be responsible for working with local businesses and prospective entrepreneurs on loans, on permits, and very highly specialized information to work on business attraction, retention, growth, job creation, and rapid response for LA businesses.
How are those functions being handled? How are those functions being
We have
handled?
a resource development unit in the department, and their primary and sole function is to seek grant funding on behalf of EWDD, both on the workforce side and on the economic development side. She's one person, but she does a very good job.
Okay.
Yeah. And to the extent that we can leverage with the rest of the city, we do that. And she is a participant in the grant working group that I think Councilman Blumenfeld has formed. And she's been participating since the beginning. So this position is not designed for that.
Okay. Any questions, members? On items 4, 5, 6, or 7?
Like on 6, just want to, where are these properties and what are we doing with them?
So the question of, you wanted us to report on the status of the properties, actually have a report. I don't know if you want me to make a report on each individual property. It's fairly detailed, but I can tell you this. What I have today is Bethune Library, First and Mission, or the Ocean Queen, First and Boyle, it's a transit project, Bunker Hill Parcel Y1, the Reseda Theater, Reseda Town Center, Westlake Theater, Marlson Square, Watts Train Station, Wilmington Block 27. So what we do is we have a working group and we track each project with the understanding that we have an option term and the date that that option is set to expire, because that's our target date to get this all done. We track the basics, including the ongoing property maintenance, the marketing approach to the development community on these CRA properties, the progress towards our milestones, and we have a schedule on every single piece of property with a time, a date certain associated with it, and indications on a regular monthly basis as to whether or not we're hitting our timeline. So our primary concern on every single one of these properties is making our option, beating our option date or not exceeding our option date, because we are, don't want to have to go back to the successor agency board and ask for an extension, because they're difficult to get.
What's this, if you know the status of Westlake?
Let me see what Westlake says. And you should know that these change on a weekly basis, but hold on a second. Westlake, okay. The RFP, I believe, was released. The staff determined the proposals were non-responsive. City planned to re-release the RFP to a broader group of developers in the second quarter of 2017. The CAO is leading the procurement efforts to retain several feasibility studies, such as-built drawings, the historical reuse analysis, to be included in this re-release. So planned appraisal report is underway. And the re-release of the RFP should be this month. This one hasn't been updated in a couple of weeks. And the developer selection will be August 2017. The option term, the option will expire March 1st, 2018. And I believe it has one 18-month extension to September 1st, 2019.
Any other questions, members, this time? Okay, we'll approve the budget recommendations and ask for a report back in 60 days, just kind of a status where we are, what's changed. on each of these items, 4 through 7. Okay? Without objection, that'll be the order.
Okay.
Mr. Clerk, what else is before us at this time?
That would be item number 3.
I'm sorry, which?
Adopted budget recommendation relative to instructing Convention Tourism Development Department to report in regard to establishing a guiding policy for the LA Convention Center private operator reserve account within the Convention Center revenue fund, with report to include a discussion on how this account is funded.
Okay, it's number 3. Come forward.
Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
My name's Diana Mangiolu. I'm with the Convention Tourism and Development Department. And the instruction was issued by Budget and Finance Committee within the last month during budget hearings, essentially advising our department on drafting a policy for our reserve. AEG is our contractor, and they operate our convention center building for us. And as part of our contract, we require that they have a 10% reserve set aside every year for the purposes of protecting the general fund. But we've done really well, and our reserve has grown beyond that. And so it begs the question of what's your plan with the reserve? So we're in the process of reaching out to other convention centers, researching the issue, looking at how other convention centers are financially structured, whether they have reserves.
So what's the dollar amount of these reserves?
In terms of our reserve, our current reserve is, by the end of the 17-18 fiscal year, we're anticipating a little over $8 million. And
this is over the amount?
This is, so
it's been projected for the...
It would be approximately $3 million is what we would be required to have. And the reason why we've developed a healthy reserve is because if we have one bad year, that money will get wiped out right away. And we're anticipating, given that we're having ongoing discussions with potentially expanding the convention center building, which may or may not impact our revenue, given that we're participating in the 2024-28 Olympics, and we're a facility that would be utilized for those Olympics. Those things are things that we are financially planning for, which is why we've built that healthy reserve. But of course, given that we have one, now we'll be developing a policy on how to manage.
And when are you going to have a specific recommendation ready for us to consider? When will you have a recommendation for us to consider?
We should have a report back by the end of summer.
Okay.
You said the operator was?
AEG.
The operator's AEG, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions, members? All right, let's approve the recommendation and ask you to report back in 60 days on the status of that report. Okay, appreciate it. Mr. Clerk, anything else before us at this time?
That is everything.
All right, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.